Let's see how this shakes out. So, shifting then into this season. Brant, over-under win totals right now, surprising to no one, I would think anyway, sits at 10.5 wins in Vegas for Michigan. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that we are both taking the over on that. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate, Dave.
Okay. So let's talk about that for a minute. I think that what's the first pause in the schedule for you? So you get through September, then what?
Dave, you know where I'm going, right?
We're going to Happy Valley.
Nope.
Oh.
I've got another game that I've got circled, Dave.
I've got one too.
Do you? Does yours take place in East Lansing?
No.
Oh, mine doesn't either. Mine actually takes place in
Nebraska.
No, mine takes place in Minneapolis. I think that we might have a tougher time with Minnesota. And let me explain why, Dave. If you don't mind. If you want to go first, you can.
Please.
No, okay. I have this sneaking suspicion that Minnesota is one of those teams that is just as physical as Michigan. They are up front, push you around. They want to run the ball. They want to take the ball away from you. And they just pose some physical presence that I don't think Michigan is going to have seen until they walk into the road into Minneapolis. And that will be the first time that they actually get physically tested. And they're like, man, we can't just go out there and push these guys down, and Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards can run for 250 yards combined. Like, I think they're going to be like, oh my gosh, we actually have to do something different. And Dave, would that surprise you if it happened to be just some sort of night game atmosphere that we're tied up at half, it starts getting itchy in the third quarter, and all of a sudden PJ Fleck's on the sidelines, got his guys absolutely riled up, night environment. I could just see that all happening like that, man. Kind of like Nebraska was a couple years ago.
I hope so. I mean, I have a similar feeling for Nebraska, to be honest with you. It's the same sort of thought that, and obviously you don't know what the Matt Rule factor is in Nebraska, and I don't need to bring up all the reasons why. Not that the game concerns me, but I just think it's one to watch. I think it's easy to look at Michigan's schedule and say, well, they just got to beat Ohio State, and then Penn State's getting some love this year too, and we can talk about that in a second. I think it will be good for this Michigan team to be tested against a Minnesota, to be tested against a Nebraska. I think it was good for them last year to be tested by Illinois. I mean, that game was just about a loss, right? If Jake Moody doesn't come in and hit that field goal, that's a loss.
They lose that game.
Yep. Right, like they were not thinking this Michigan team was going to struggle with Illinois. This Michigan team that everyone is on the hype train with, and myself included, they will run into a Big Ten opponent or two that is going to scare you. And it's always interesting. I think you learn the true grit of a team and how they respond to that, right? Obviously, you can measure it by a win, but how do they respond? Because Michigan team last year, I mean, Brant, they had close games, right? Even against Rutgers, but they were a second half team. They were, and they really relied on that all year. Too much so, until it caught them and bit them in the butt against TCU, right? But that was kind of the MO of that team, was even when faced against adversity, they were going to come out and destroy you in the second half. They were going to win in the trenches. They were going to wear you down, and they were going to bust the thing wide open. You would think that that's a similar identity to this team, but we don't know yet. This is a new team, right? While you have a lot of returning guys, you also have people who left, and I think they could be battle-tested early on. I like the Minnesota call.
Yeah, no, and Dave, that's the second leg. So they head to Nebraska first, which I think they will be up for. But, those back-to-back road trips, you can get tired. You can be not focused, especially if Minnesota happens to be 4-2, 4-1, 3-2, whatever it might be the case. You might be sleeping on them a little bit. And this isn't just for Michigan, Dave. Remember Georgia last year? They go into Missouri, kind of a sleepy game, whatever. All of a sudden, in the fourth quarter, it's a 3-point game.
Yep.
And they're calling on Brock Bowers to make unbelievable plays to pull him out of the fire. And that, Dave, so we're not just talking about Michigan. We're talking about Georgia's going to do this. Alabama's going to do it. Ohio State is going to do this against somebody this year. It happens every single year to almost every single team, Dave, right? Where it's like, man, you better flip over right now because it's in the third quarter and it's getting late in the third quarter. And it is a 3-point ball game, 7-point ball game. And when teams are on the road, weird things happen, man. And it's one drop, it's one fumble here, it's one tip ball here, other way. You know how it goes.
It's one JJ McCarthy injury away too. I mean, luckily you can lean on Blake and Donovan, but I mean both of them. Blake, we saw what happened to him last year. Injuries happen. Donovan played with a club on his hand like most of the year. JJ McCarthy goes down or has to take a half out. He rolls his ankle, like whatever it is. You're on the road. Yeah. We're going to see what the team is made of. Those are the games that I'm looking forward to. Like, of course, I want to see September and, like, you know, pat ourselves on the back of how good our team is and how great they look. But the reality is, like, I can't wait till Big Ten play to see when they do get tested, how they respond.
Yeah, and Dave, this is the wrong show to come to if you're a Michigan fan and you're looking for us to say, oh, well, JJ was injured, so we lost. Like, that's not an excuse this year. You are good enough to get everything done that you need to get done. And it's next man up. There is no excuses for losing the game just because you may have lost your quarterback or you lost your running back. I mean, we saw it down in Columbus last year. Heisman candidate Blake Corum, like, goes down. You did exactly what you need to do. Insert Donovan Edwards, win football game. We are not going to be making excuses out here for injuries, right?
Nope. Certainly will not be. This is not the show for you if you want us to make excuses when it comes to that. This team is deep enough and should be prepared enough to be able to step in and get the job done. So we're both over on the 10.5 thing. Let's go to Penn State for just a second, because that is, I mean, outside of Ohio State, and I don't even, we can do Ohio State in a different episode. Yeah, we know about the QB competition. We know the Devin Brown, Kyle McCord thing, whatever. Ohio State's going to be a really good team. They just are. We know that. History shows us that. Penn State's on the up and up. James Franklin is still their head coach. Maybe that gives you some confidence. But Drew Aller, former 5-star quarterback, gets his shot. Sean Clifford no longer there. Feels like it's been a decade, but he's no longer the quarterback. Are you buying the Penn State hype? I know it's early. I know obviously we haven't seen this team play yet. They returned Nick Singleton, another really good running back. You buying into Penn State?
I'm buying 80% of the stock, Dave. I'm there with them. I've got to see Aller play. Like, I've got to see him actually insert. Like, I knew exactly what I was getting with Sean Clifford, and I knew what to expect when he took over in games, and that was usually just a guy that's going to grit you out and be in the game, right? But maybe not ever win you that big game. Now, they say that Aller's going to be the kid that comes in and, like, how JJ did last year, goes into Columbus and storms the place, basically. That's what they're expecting Aller to be. And you know what, Dave? They have 2 dynamite running backs. I know you know that. They have an offensive line that is good. Maybe not great, but good. And their defensive line and their defense, Dave, every single year is going to be probably top 20. I mean, they're going to be absolutely great. And traveling into Happy Valley is never a fun task. Thank God it's at noon and not 7:30. I know that both of us are very thankful for that. But, they have, like, all Big Ten players on their team, though. I mean, I know the defensive player, Chop Robinson, he's an absolute beast. He's going to be a first-round draft pick someday. And gives you, like, Micah Parsons vibes, which is absolutely devastatingly scary. But, no, that trip to Happy Valley, that's going to, like, really show you what Michigan is, though. Like, even though we talked about Nebraska and Minnesota and maybe a trip to East Lansing before that, those are still a different echelon. That's not Tier 1 Big Ten football. Traveling to Happy Valley, Penn State is Tier 1 football, and we're going to see what we're made of.
I agree. What I always find interesting about Michigan and Penn State is they recruit a lot of the same kids.
Yeah.
They kind of hit the same pipeline, so a lot of these players on both sides of that game, they know the coaching staff. It adds, I wouldn't say it's a rivalry game, but it kind of feels like it at times. And going into Happy Valley is a really tough environment. I cannot wait for that game. Happy it's not a night game like you said, but I can't wait for that one. Brant, so let's just play this out and say things are going really well, whether it's 11-1 or 12-0, and they get to the college football playoff again, they don't get it done. I don't know. Maybe they win a game, losing the national championship to Georgia. I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself. If Michigan doesn't win a national championship this year, is the season a failure? And will we look back on this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, as the woulda, coulda, shoulda season and look at it as a failure? Even if they beat Ohio State, even if they win another Big Ten championship, is it looked at as a failure if they don't bring home a national championship this year?
Yes, Dave. Absolutely, this is a failure of a season if you do not get it done. That makes me more nervous than I've ever been. You know what I mean? But just truth be told, this team has everything that it takes to win a national championship. Seasoned quarterback, as seasoned quarterback as you can find in today's college football. Great offensive line, great defensive line, backs, spectacular. I think the wide receiver room leaves a little question marks, Dave, right? Like, we do have some question marks in the receiver room. Potentially the secondary, who will be the second corner, but I don't think anything where we're like, oh my gosh, this could be a sore spot of this team. But
right.
Overall, I think navigating the schedule, if you can stay injury-free enough, then you're going to be there right in the end. And to not to be able to pull it off, I think will be a major disappointment for all Michigan fans. And if you're happy that we made the college football playoff for the third time, we lost in the first round, then I got nothing for you. That's
I can't help you.
I can't. I got nothing for you, man.
To be honest, I don't get that take. For those who I'm in your corner. I agree. It's national championship or bust. It's horrible to say that because you set yourself up for failure. It is so hard to win a national championship. It's going to get a lot harder even after this year, but it is so hard to win a national championship. But to say that's the expectation or failure, we're setting ourselves up for failure. However, they have the team, they have the roster, they have no excuses to not go and win a national championship. Sure, wide receiver room could use some upgrades or at least some players to kind of step up. You can look at that second cornerback spot, right? Maybe that's a weakness. I don't know. Josh Wallace looks like he's been a solid transfer to come in, maybe buy a Marion Walker some time. But truly, you look at this roster up and down, there's no reason why it shouldn't be national championship or bust. And I think it's a loser mentality to go into it and say, well, yeah, but we just beat Ohio State again, but we won another Big Ten championship. Well, when do you take the next step? If not this year, then when? Things are gonna get challenging after this year. I mean, they're challenging enough as is to go in and beat a team like Georgia. The thought of a 12-team playoff and having to beat a Texas or an Alabama or a Tennessee or an LSU before you even go play a team like a Georgia or USC or whatever. It's going to get interesting. Or even a team like Utah, right? Like Utah's a team I never want to play in the postseason. Like they're just so gritty, and those teams are going to be there, and they're going to be tough to beat. So yeah, it's national championship or bust. You've heard, Jim Harbaugh won't use that term. In fact, he will say people aren't saying that. He doesn't know where that's coming from. Just listen to the players. They'll tell you that. Blake Corum will tell you that. He will say it's national championship or bust. He is back not only because of, I'm sure, NIL, but he did not end last season the way he wanted to, being on the bench and being injured. So yeah, he's back. Chris Jenkins is back. Mikey Samer's still back. Like these guys are fully equipped to go ahead and make a run at a national championship. Brand, I do have just